All right, so good evening. I'd like to reconvene our regular meeting. We have asked Justin Dennison to please lead us in tonight's pledge. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So I'd like to welcome our audience to the meeting tonight. I would like to excuse President Venkatachalam. She was out of town this evening and could not join us. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in the public to comply with Open Public Meetings Act. We do have a process for audience participation, and I'd like to go over that. The purpose of the board meetings is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Those wishing to comment must complete a comment card and give it to the board secretary before the meeting begins or no later than agenda item 4.0 presentation. No cards will be accepted once presentations have begun. Abusive public comments personally directed towards staff members will not be tolerated. The president may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when it is too lengthy, obscene, or irrelevant. When it is your turn to address the board, please state your name at the start of your testimony. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. You'll hear a timer when the 3 minutes is up. Visitors who have completed a comment card indicating a desire to speak to an agenda item will be called at that portion of the agenda. Per board procedure, written material should be provided to board members with the background information to the superintendent's office at least 1 week in advance of the meeting. So, Dr. Watts, are there any changes to tonight's agenda?
Yes, thank you, Vice President Strauss. Please note that agenda item 5.01, board discussion on an update for the performance audit being conducted by Clark Neuber, has been removed from the agenda.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a board member to make a motion to accept the changes.
Move to accept changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Are there any questions or discussions? Then I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please say no and raise your right hand. Motion passes. We'll now proceed with our superintendent's report. Dr. Watts?
Yes, again, Vice President Strauss, members of the board, Ms. Holly, community members, staff, and friends, we do celebrate our commitment this evening. We celebrate our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion during this month by celebrating members of our LGBTQ community and also celebrating Dyslexia Month, which our governor, Jay Inslee, has recently recognized over the past couple of years. So included in this evening's report, I would like to begin with Be the I in Kind. That refers to our student and family support services, most recently supporting our administration center's open house, which I've shared previously. But one in particular, I did have the opportunity to stand in front and also be a witness to others who have stood in front and to be literally the I in KIND. The Student Family Support Services team recently purchased that banner to promote kindness in support of our action learning projects, the first among 3 to create and sustain a welcoming environment, not only within our schools, within our district offices, And in this case, the banner is now being made available for our schools to check out, to spread kindness symbolically and literally around the district. And it's just but only one way that we've provided an opportunity to create and sustain that kind of welcoming environment. Speaking of kindness, I also want to pay tribute to several of our leaders, in this case, 3 school-based leaders. Kudos to Glen Ridge Elementary School teacher Ann Bogle and Daniel Elementary School Assistant Principal Jennifer Hoagland for their heartfelt, inspirational, and relevant words regarding the importance of choosing kind. Both leaders spoke during our recent Starry Night fundraising event, which is sponsored by Kent Schools Foundation, and we are grateful for their efforts supporting teaching and learning with an emphasis on learning and the resources that are needed. And I'm also very grateful to our Glen Ridge Elementary School principal, Scott Abernathy, for his ongoing commitment to social emotional learning. So thank you to each one of them for their influence and their support. Another support that will never go unnoticed is our elementary paraeducators. We know that they play an instrumental role in supporting our teachers. This month, as a matter of fact, until the 24th, Paraeducators Fall Institute will continue to be held October 21st to the 24th, 1:30 to 3. Our paraeducators are continuing to learn and earn a fundamental course of study credits for several of these sessions, and they can enroll in classes for professional growth. As we move to by the numbers, recently we've learned that a form, technically speaking, it is referred to, and we'll hear more about this form in a presentation coming soon to a board meeting near you. P223, that refers to our enrollment counts. And when you hear about that, I want you to keep in mind this one-year comparison. While you may know that we receive resources and revenue from the numbers of students who enroll in our schools, we've had a significant increase in enrollment in Kent School District from the 2018-19 school year to this year, 2019-20. After a year-over-year September decline in enrollment, our October counts are up by 80 students, 80 FTE, compared to a year ago, from 25,411 students to 25,491 students. Those FTE include specifically students, or do not include, I should say, individuals who are enrolled in iGrad or enrolled as a full-time running START student. We also celebrate Dyslexia Awareness Month in October. And I would like to inform our general public that we are not just recognizing this intellectual and reading difference. The reality is that we are taking action in the form of creating a dyslexia advisory group. And I'm proud and pleased for the efforts that have surfaced from our teaching and learning community, that we are now requesting volunteers to join Kent School District's Dyslexia Advisory Group. Beginning in 2021, 2022, each school district is responsible for screening students in kindergarten through grade 2. And this data will be applied to the district's MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support, to provide appropriate academic interventions and to support each student's literacy development. We know that the ability to read, to write, certainly impacts our students' ability to succeed and be successful within K-12 and beyond. We're following updates from the state and planning to prepare for full implementation. So what does this mean? In these early stages to full-scale implementation, in the 1920 academic year, this year, we'll develop outcomes, a timeline. We'll finalize the implementation plan by winter 2020. We'll review and make recommendations for screening assessments, for training providers and supplemental resources. We will discuss and identify options for field testing of screening and training and curriculum. And we'll develop a sustainable budget for training and assessment for next academic year, 2020 through 2021. and develop a communications plan also for the 2021 academic year. So how can you and those who are viewing and will have the opportunity to review, we're seeking 20 to 30 volunteers to dedicate approximately 3 hours per month for 6 months to define the Kent School District instructional support for screening for dyslexia and providing instructional supports for students. So we're looking for those volunteers from different areas of our community. And I know that these groups are represented here, whether you're an assessment coordinator, central admin staff member, college or university staff member, a counselor, an external service provider, a parent, family member, a principal, assistant principal, student, support staff, teacher. If you're interested in joining this dyslexia advisory group or you simply want to learn more, please access our Kent School District homepage and click the link Get Involved. And that will lead you to many different committees that we have in place for our community members to provide their input and help us solve problems and ideally to avoid problems in the future. In this case, you'll be able to choose Dyslexia Advisory Group among available options. The application deadline for this advisory group is October 28th, 2019. Thank you for your continued support of our priority initiatives, and that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Watts. So at this time, we're going to move to 3.0, our recognition, and we have 4 proclamations tonight. Our first one is the proclamation on America's Safe School Week, and Director DeBruler will be reading that.
Thank you, Vice President Strauss. America's Safe Schools Week. Whereas schools make substantial contributions to the future of America and to the development of our nation's young people as knowledgeable, responsible, and productive citizens, and whereas the National School Safety Center, state governors, and state school superintendents sponsor American Safe Schools Week, the week of October 21st to 27th, 2019, and whereas excellence in education is dependent on safe, secure, and peaceful school settings, and whereas the safety and well-being of many students, teachers, and school staff are unnecessarily jeopardized by crime and violence, such as substance abuse, gangs, bullying, poor discipline, vandalism, and absenteeism in our schools, and whereas it is the responsibility of all citizens to enhance the learning experiences of young people by helping to ensure fair and effective discipline, promote good citizenship, and generally make schools safe and secure. And whereas all leaders, especially those in education, law enforcement, government, and business, should eagerly collaborate with each other and the National School Safety Center, a partnership of the U.S. Department of Justice and the U.S. Department of Education, to focus public attention on school safety and identity, and identify, develop, and promote innovative answers to these critical issues. And whereas school safety programs in numerous schools and school districts throughout the country, along with national programs, are among those innovative answers. And whereas the observance of America's Safe Schools Week will substantially promote efforts to provide all our nation's schools with positive and safe learning climates. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of making our schools safe, secure, and peaceful places for learning, teaching, and working, free of drugs, alcohol, weapons, and fear, and proclaims the week of October 21st through the 27th, 2019, America's Safe Schools Week in the Kent School District.
Thank you. And at this time, we'd like to invite Israel to come up to accept the proclamation, please.
Members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ali, I'd like to accept this on behalf of Tim Kovich, our safety services supervisor, who wasn't able to be here tonight due to family engagement. But not only him, but all of our safety services officers who on a daily basis work to help support our students in our environment. In fact, today, Tim was out at Kentwood High School all day, and it was a long day, but working with our students there. And so on behalf of our safety services, thank you very much for your support.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to invite Director Daniels to please read our proclamation for LGBT History Month.
Thank you, Vice President Strauss. Whereas LGBT History Month celebrates the achievements of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender individuals, and whereas in 1994, a Missouri high school teacher gathered other teachers and community leaders and selected the month of October to be dedicated to the celebration and teaching of gay and lesbian history, and whereas just under a quarter of students are taught LGBT history in schools, and only 5 states require its public schools to include LGBT history in the curriculum. And whereas LGBT History Month is recognized to remind both the LGBT and wider communities of the important roles LGBT individuals have played in creating social, legal, and political worlds in which we live. And whereas the Kent School District Board believes in fostering an educational environment that is safe and free of discrimination for all students, regardless of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. Now therefore be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors recognizes the month of October as LGBT History Month and encourages the discussion of LGBT history in schools and classrooms during that time.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask the Kentwood students from the Gender and Sexuality Alliance to accept the proclamation, please. Is anyone there? Okay. All right. Thank you. So at this time, I will read the National Physical Therapy Month proclamation. Whereas the Kent School District is committed to supporting students with special needs and providing every student with equal access to education regardless of physical needs, whereas the American Physical Therapy Association recognizes how physical therapists and their assistants improve people's lives by restoring and improving their abilities and movements, and whereas the Kent School District encourages staff, students, community members to increase awareness of the benefits of Physical Therapy Month in the month of October. Therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaim the month of October as National Physical Therapy Month in the Kent School District and calls upon all citizens and civic organizations to join in the national effort to raise awareness of physical therapy and how therapists and their assistants improve students' access to education. So at this time, I'd like to invite Con Whittier to please accept the proclamation.
Did you get your name right?
Oh, that's totally fine. That's close enough.
Clarify your name.
Close enough.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. Con Whitwer. Thank you, Board, very much. On behalf of myself and other physical therapy professionals that work in Kent School District, it's an absolute joy and honor to be able to serve the students. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to invite Director Hardy to please read our proclamation for National School Bus Safety Week.
Yes, whereas National School Bus Safety Week is an active and evolving public education program and is an excellent way for parents, students, teachers, motorists, school bus operators, school administrators, and community members to join together to address the importance of school bus safety. And whereas Kent School District buses meet or exceed federal and state regulations and consistently receive a 100% passing score in the annual inspection by the State Patrol. And whereas many students begin and end their day with a school bus ride, approximately 10,000 students are transported daily on 129 routes, and 155 school buses traveling approximately 1,548,530 miles each year. And whereas the key to school bus safety lies in qualified, competent, and capable school bus drivers, mechanics, and support staff. And whereas this year's theme for National School Bus Safety Week is My School Bus, the Safest Form of Student Transportation, the Board recognizes the high caliber of the transportation team and commends staff for the exemplary job of safely transporting students. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Kent School District Board of Directors emphasizes the importance of student safety and proclaims the week of October 21st through the 25th, 2019, National School Bus Safety Week in the Kent School District.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite our Transportation Director, Justin Dennison, to please accept the proclamation.
Members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Halley, thank you very much for recognizing School Bus Safety Week. We brought some of our transportation team here today, and I'm going to quickly call them out here. We've got Vicki Snyder, Route 22. Raise your hand. Or stand, yeah. We got Ivan Liu. He's a driver trainer and a relief driver. We've got Doreen Stewart, our assistant director. And Christy Malgren, our dispatcher. Christy starts us off each morning at 5 a.m., so shout out to her. And then Tim Lash, our driver trainer. So thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for being here this evening. At this point, we will move on to 4.0, our presentations. Our first one being our Strategic Plan Goal 1, Student Achievement SBA presentation. Dr. Watts.
Vice President Strauss, if I may, before we begin with the presentation, we are going to take photos of those individuals who've accepted their proclamations. So
absolutely.
We'll very quickly, and we'll be right with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any students that came in for the LGBTQ from GSA at Kentwood?
We're students from Kentwood, but we're willing to take any good students. We'll make sure that we get
I might be asking. I apologize for if I ask some correct questions. That might be a bit weird. Just
I'm good.
So thank you again to everyone tonight that we recognized and for the work that you do. So we will now proceed with 4.01. So Dr. Watts, if you could please introduce our presenter.
Yes, thank you, Vice President Strauss, members of the board, Ms. Halley, community and friends. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our Director of Assessment, Ms. Talisa Reed, from the Organizational Effectiveness Community and DARTS team, who will provide a detailed high-level overview of Smarter Balanced Assessment proficiency data for 2018-2019 academic year. Talisa?
Thank you, Dr. Watts. Good afternoon to our board, Ms. Howley, and of course our guest here. I am, of course, connected directly to organizational effectiveness, but tonight I'm focusing on our goal number 1, which is student achievement. So the job of assessment is to design, deliver, and we develop and maintain tools. I specifically choose not to use the word test because assessments are just tools that we use. So to remove that angst behind the language, we specifically manage, design, develop tools that teachers and our administrators use to evaluate, measure, and document the academic readiness, learning progress, skill acquisition, and educational needs of our students with the goal of successfully preparing them for their futures. Tonight, hopefully you guys will gain an understanding of the district's 1819 SBA proficiency data, and we look at that data through the lens of our data, OSPI's data theory of action. ESSA index weights, of course, Washington has a school improvement framework which creates a holistic view of our schools in our district by measuring different indices. And then tonight we're going to specifically look at our proficiency from Smarter Balance, which weighs in at the elementary middle school when they start calculating it at 40%, and at the high schools it's 30%. Just to give you a brief overview of what that data theory of action looks like if you're visually looking at it. What it says basically is pretty much that when the conditions for data use are in place, meaning that they're useful, we build in capacity and the culture, a data literate culture, and use it to drive our decisions and our actions, we hope to achieve focused results. And we make sure that data is able to be sustained, systemic, and student-centered. So now to look at KSD's proficiency in comparison to Washington State, I'm going to open up our district's data dashboards that were particularly developed for you all tonight. Okay, that's not it. Let me see. That's not it. All right, here we go. We can work now. So looking at KSD in comparison to Washington State with ELA across grade bands, what you're seeing here is where we measure in comparison to our state. KSD for our third graders, 51%, whereas the state of Washington is 55%. What I've noticed here, things that stand out is our data is pretty flat in comparison to the state, and I will say that that is consistent throughout districts. What you see reminding us that February we were out of school for a long time, along with maybe some other things, but I think February was very pivotal in actually having an impact on what our students, we have some districts, I'm talking to the state, that were out almost a month of school. So our kids here in KSD were out in February and then a day in January. Particular attention to, as a highlight for me, because I will look at our data all the time, and if you can remember, I came to you in January with our mid-year iReady data, and I specifically talked about our sixth graders. If you notice, our sixth grade data is neck and neck with directly on target with where the state is. And our high schools, our 10th graders showed up, and actually 1%. They got the state. They beat the state out. So that's a great highlight for me. Our math data, we see pretty much the similar pattern. And again, sixth grade, neck and neck with where the state is, a good indicator. Like I said last year, those are some kids to watch. And again, our data is pretty flat this year. We're not seeing a whole lot of dips, and that is a trend throughout the state. There's no great spikes in growth or declines. When we're looking at our individual Smarter Balance analysis, let's look at it based on ethnicity and a 3-year trend. So what we're seeing is 3 years worth of data for our students broken down by demographics. We're seeing, if you follow that cohort, you're seeing that the cohorts aren't really losing, they are gaining year to year on target. No massive growth, but not much loss either. And again, with our grade levels, we still see pretty flat, nothing that really stands out a lot. I really do think that February had a real big impact on that. When we looked at the amount of growth from our students up until mid-year, we saw massive gains in growth, saw a little slowing down in comparison, that mid-year point, and then some massive gains towards the end, lots of kids meeting those target growth goals. Our students also take the Smarter Balanced Math, of course, same grade levels, and you will see those trends still remain the same. Little growth, very small decline in our growth. You guys have any questions thus far? Go ahead.
I do a little bit, it's hard for me to see because we're not looking at the same thing you are. We just have the one.
You have the actual, you don't have the dashboard. And we can give you the dashboard because it's actually broken down. We break it down by director districts as well.
I see.
So you can actually see your schools in comparison, so that can happen very quickly.
I've asked every time we talk about math scores and how they decline as the kids get older, and how much is that attributed to the curriculum? And
well, we know math gets harder as they get older. The processing requirements are different. I will say this year that we do have the iReady Ready math curriculum in K-5, and so that comes equipped with the entire curriculum as far as to align with the diagnostics and all of the recommendations that are made for our teachers to use specifically for our students based off of that diagnostic. They have online quizzes, and they also have online lessons K-5 to supplement. So I am pretty sure, I'm pretty positive and hopeful about that iReady product, period. So hoping to see once that is all aligned with the use full circle K-5, we'll start seeing some much bigger gains.
Does the SBA align well with the Washington State Learning Standards now? And do our curricula that we are working with align with those things?
Our curriculum does, and Teaching and Learning does an excellent job, an amazing job at making sure that those things are also aligned out. And we also use iReady, which is aligned, and of course it's aligned to Common Core standards. And we see a very, it's a really strong predictor of smarter balance proficiency in the end. I actually have those numbers here based on December's numbers. They were neck and neck. Very close, very close. So given a full school year without the massive interruptions in instruction and those gaps with an alignment of curriculum, I give you a pretty good prediction this year that we probably will more than likely start seeing those massive gains in areas. Because right now we absolutely reflect what the state looks like.
So it looks like, though, there's kind of a trend of decreasing percentage of performance everywhere except for, is that 5th grade and 10th grade? That's the only places where we saw improvement. There's flat, is that right?
Yeah, they're all pretty flat. When you start looking at what those percentages are, it's going from, if you look at 16, 17, 45%, then it's 47% and to 46%. Remember, we're looking at a cohort. So if I'm following this cohort, 17, 18's 5th graders are 18, 19 6th graders here. And so if you see it's 47, but remember those foundational standards, the standards are different. But those foundational standards are, for me, what stands out. They had to have a decent grasp of what was taught the year before. They've maintained themselves in sort of a manner. Is that
so the clear? 17, so as I'm looking at the 17, 18, 6th graders?
This is sixth
That
grade
one?
here.
So, and then that would be, the cohort would be the seventh graders of the next year.
So if we look at that cohort, it's 2000.
So there's still a decrease.
There is a
That's what I'm
decrease.
saying. So there's a trend. It seems as though.
There's also, when you look at data, remember this is one snapshot in time. Let's take into account that transition. That's a transition year. So you see some declines there when you start considering social emotional things and how those things impact going to a new school. Some children may have not gone to school, especially with Kent being pretty transient. Our kids start in one place. I know this year I've already seen a kid start in a school, leave, go to another school, and back at another school. And school has only been in for a good month or so. So those things do have a major impact on how students are, or I could have just not had a good day.
So what are we doing differently based on the data that we see? So are we making any changes? Are there anything that we're looking at doing?
Well, with the alignment of the math curriculum, particularly in K-5, that was a change resulting from what data was showing in previous years. There are a lot more professional developments, especially particularly around using the curriculum. Professional developments around aligning data to instructional practices, aligning data to the decisions that we make, and just growing a data literate culture of not just we have data, but what do I do with it once I have it? What does it mean? How many different pieces do I need? I will say this publicly, Smarter Balance is not the only means of data. When I'm looking at making a decision for a student, I'm looking at multiple lenses of data. That's where our MTSS comes in. We're looking at interventions, looking at those reports from our formative assessment, like iReady in high schools, it would be IABs, those standards that students are missing, and how are we filling those gaps, bridging those gaps along the way so that students can access that. So that's been a major part of the work of our department and our team last year, just really going in, increasing the use and the literacy behind data.
So I have a follow-up question based on that. So if we look at our SBA data compared to some of our other tools when we're assessing students, are we seeing any trends that way as far as is SBA any type of an indicator on how a student may perform using one of the other tools? Or is it...
I think it varies. I think it varies by students. Some students, I can look at their Smarter Balance and pin them. I can say for sure, I'm going to see a trend, but it is based on a trend of what they've been doing. I'm seeing in multiple pieces of data, so not just one piece. I think we would look at it the opposite way and looking at the formative assessments and then seeing how we can kind of predict and make sure that those formative assessments are aligned to our standards to kind of predict what that proficiency might look like, and just not on the back end, because once Smarter Balance is done, it is a summative. It's done. But iReady is one that we use that we can consistently look at. Our standards mastery assessments. We can look at our online quizzes. We can look at how our students are performing on our lessons. At the high school level, we have our teachers using IABs, which are from the state, and those are directly aligned to what our standards are that we can kind of predict out that way.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more question. So what
Yes,
would you attribute the decline each year in? Not the cohort, but just the entire, so the third grade, right? Each year from 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. Each of the grades seems to have kind of a decline each year. What would you attribute that to?
When you're looking at the standard deviations and start looking at what's statistically significant and what that actually boils down to, it's pretty flat. It really does not show the number you see is saying, but for me it is, if I'm seeing 15% down, that's down. That's something going out. But when we see 1 or 2 up, even when Smarter Balance sends out the individual score reports, the student reports, it shows a plus or minus. And I think this year for third grade, it's plus or minus 25 points. So it could make a really big difference. And that 25 points in the grand scheme of things, that's where you could kind of see that shift. But it's hard to say what that would be attributed to because I don't have other pieces of data in front of me at all.
Growth goals.
Their growth goals
What are the growth goals?
aligned to iReady.
The aligned to, let's just even, do we have
The
any?
student growth percentiles have not come out yet for 18-19.
No, I'm saying, what are the goals as far as a district? Are there, or maybe I should ask, are there growth goals? So for example, when you look at this data and you plan for next year, what are there, is there a, say, students would increase 10%, or are there growth goals?
Our growth goals are attached to iReady so teachers can actually use them quicker. So every student has a growth goal. I'm thinking last year, I'm thinking the younger students was 14 points was the typical growth, and then there was a stretch growth goal. So what we saw and what I have looked at is when a student did meet their typical growth goal or they met their stretch growth goal, they did perform right where they were predicted to perform for Smarter Balance. So it varies by age because it takes into account what the standards are and different measures.
Talisa, I appreciate, first of all, the presentation and bringing the complexities of assessment and scoring to this audience. And Director Daniels, I appreciate your question. I want to ask it in a different way because I think I understand where you're wanting us to go, or at least have a thought. So we may not know exactly what the attributing factors are to a student's performance one way or the other. If we see that there are trends in one direction or the other, what might be some attributing factors to a cohort's slight or more than slight decline, or on the other side of that, what might be attributing factors to a cohort's increasing their performance?
So I know last year I was very interested in those sixth graders because I was noticing a trend with them and how they were all for some reason meeting their typical growth goal, and they had met their stretch growth goal by midpoint in the year. I also looked at the attendance for that year, for that cohort last year, those sixth graders. Their attendance was pretty good. Discipline was good. So there are multiple pieces of things. So to pin the one thing on what I can hardcore say, I can't. I think it would be an unfair assessment to make without having that whole piece in front of me, which is why OSPI uses that ESSA index so that it can take into account multiple things when we're looking at student goals and growth. I've seen students actually do very well and meet their stretch growth goals already and not do well on Smarter Balance. Smarter Balance also is given during a season where a lot of our kids miss a little while of school. So
because I'm struggling, then what is the point of this data, I guess?
What's the point of this data? To see how our kids actually did during the previous year.
It shows that we're below the state standard, and it shows that we're declining in proficiency. And so that's what we're saying. This looks bad. If you're showing it to me, I don't like the outcome of what's going on. And so I'm trying to explain why show me this if the explanation for it is data that's not here.
So one of the things I can talk about specifically with the curriculum aspect of this, if we look at our elementary curriculum, and safe to say quite a bit of our curriculum we had a freeze on curriculum adoption. So with our elementary curriculum for, I don't know, the last several years, it was not aligned to the state standards.
Sure.
And that could be a huge contributing factor, specifically at elementary. And if you look at those kids as they progress from grade level to grade level, they kind of started and were working with the curriculum that may not have been aligned to the most current state standards.
Okay.
So do we now have the new math curriculum?
We do. We do. You just adopted it at the end of last school year, and we've been aggressively providing training to our teachers. And across the board, one of the things that we worked on last year, I don't, am I talking to the microphone?
You're fine.
Okay. One of the things that we worked on last year was really taking a look at our curriculum. We've started implementing a more frequent curriculum review cycle. And we started this work last year. One of the first things that we did was update all of our instructional frameworks. We created an assessment map that really maps out throughout the year the specific academic standards that students are working on unit to unit. So that's available to all of our teachers. Our next step is really looking at the assessment piece and how do we better align our formative assessments to kind of match that.
Okay. So we're doing things
Yes.
to change this.
Yes.
And so I guess like what would you expect those gains to see? And this is a guess. This is not the evidence. It's like, is this get us to 70%, or is that, unrealistic statistically out of the, it's designed to stabilize the decline, it's designed to increase slightly? What do we think our goal should be?
We're certainly looking for an increase. One of the things with the iReady formative assessment data is that there's some goals that are individualized per student. There are goals that you can look at per school that's aligned to the school improvement plan around what that data tells you and what the performance targets are. But if we zoom out district-wide, one of my guide points has been our blueprint and our strategic initiatives and looking at what is it going to take to get us there. And I think we will see some incremental growth, but it's not something, I don't think we'll see a big change in that data in 1 year.
And I would think with the farther out you get, the lesser amount of gain you're going to have, just because they're going to have less of background information with where the standards are.
So that's where our MTSS structures come into place, and trying to close that gap by targeted interventions. And our schools are doing a really good job of that, but when you have big gaps in knowledge, it just takes years to kind of begin to fill that gap.
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you,
All right,
Danelle.
thank you.
Thank you, Talisa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Danelle.
So we will now move on to 4.02, student enrollment and demographic trends. Dr. Watts, if you could introduce our presenter, please.
Yes. Student enrollment and demographic trends, I'd like to call Dr. Ashley Birkland, who will present current student enrollment, demographic trends for Kent School District, and you will see similar process, or you'll see vision. No, I thought we were going to see. There we go.
Not today.
Not today.
You just did, right?
Yes.
More to come.
There we
There
go.
you go. Thank you. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah, thank you.
Dr. Birkland, excuse me. Thank you. Well,
Still new.
yes.
Good evening, members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley. I'm Ashley Birkland, the Director of Assessment and Organizational Effectiveness on the research team in DARTS, and today I'm going to be giving a pretty high-level overview around our student enrollment and demographic trends in KSD. We'll be focusing at the district level, not breaking down into any school-level data. So we have two goals for tonight. One is to have a better understanding of KSD enrollment trends and changes by grade. And the other is an understanding of how KSD demographics have changed over time. So here's our first chart, looking at our enrollment over time. Dr. Watts talked about the P223 earlier, and he was talking about FTE, which is a little bit different than what's being shown here. This is head count. So FTE can have a fraction of a student. This is whole students. But we're still seeing that gain from last year, and this is October to October over time. And as Dr. Watts said earlier, this does not include our full-time Running Start students, pre-K, iGrad. But I did pull some Running Start numbers, and we are slightly down in Running Start from last year, but we were really up a lot last year. So we're kind of maybe right-sizing in that direction. So more students back at our schools, not necessarily out doing Running Start. This is enrollment by grade and how those have changed. When I gave this presentation last year, there were 2, I think, areas where it was green and everything else was red. This year, we're seeing more grades where there's an increase. And last year, our big increases were in 6th and 7th. This year, we're seeing they're in 7th and 8th. So that one makes sense. The kids are still here. They're coming through. A few more kids up in kindergarten, and then a big jump in 2nd grade, and then also an increase in 10th grade. I don't have a full understanding of why that is the case, but those are up as well, and probably do some further digging into that. All right. This is our demographic trend on ethnicity and how our demographics have changed over time. Similar to last year, we're still seeing that our white population is going down. We are down from 42% in the 2010-11 school year to 31% in the 2019-20 school year. So an 11% drop over those 8-9 years. And then we're seeing an increase in our Hispanic Latino population, our Asian population, our multiracial population is also up. So then we're seeing where some of those groups are coming up when the others are going down. And then fairly flat for our Pacific Islander population and our American Indian Alaska Native population. And a slight increase in our Black population. Here is a demographic trend of poverty. So this is looking at free and reduced lunch eligibility, with the blue bar being students who qualify for free or reduced price meals, the orange being those that don't. Over the last few years, we've kind of been 50-50 either way. Slight, if you rounded these to the nearest whole number, they would be 50-50 over the last few years. So just very slight changes, but pretty equal. So we had some time in the past where we were more free and reduced lunch in the higher 50s, 54, 55%, but then we've been going back down. And we know that real estate prices are changing and the community is changing and all of that, so this could have something to do with that piece. This is our ELL trend. You can see that since 2011, it's been going up, and then the last 2 years from here, it's been pretty stable. This year it's a little bit lower, but this is also looking through a full year. So as new students come in, that number will increase. We're only in October right now. The other years are showing through the end of the school year. So we'll probably expect this to come up and be similar to last year. This is our special education trend, also pretty consistent. It's kind of interesting. It was bigger relatively in 2010-11, then got smaller, and then has been getting a little bit bigger again. But overall, fairly flat in the terms of the size of the population, been around 10 to 11% the last few years. All right. Now on to top languages. So these are home languages, as indicated on the enrollment forms, and this is for elementary school. So we're looking at how our top languages have changed. And there's a few things to note here. There's a big jump in Dari from 15 to 8. It's about 200 students that are that have that language identified. Just to put it into perspective, these numbers drop off pretty dramatically. Like English is in the thousands, Spanish is in the thousands, and when we get to Punjabi, we're in the hundreds. So the populations get smaller, but it is still 200 students in elementary. And then there's also a jump in Arabic from 10th to 7th. And then we see some drops, like Ukrainian went from 3rd to 6th, and Russian went from 7th to 10th. So some changes over time in what the languages look like that are spoken for our elementary students. Next is middle school, and we see some similar trends. Dari up again from 15th to 10th, Arabic from 11th to 7th, and then some of the same things with Ukrainian down from 3rd to 6th, Russian from 7 to 9, and some little changes in between. Vietnamese went from 5th to 3rd for our middle school students. There's a little more change in middle school since it's only 2 years, so that population can change a little bit more often. The last one is for high school, and again, really similar trends. We're seeing that same dip in Russian. The Ukrainian isn't quite as pronounced. It went from 4th to 6th. Again, seeing an increase in Arabic and an increase in Dari. So pretty consistent across all 3 of the school types. This slide is comparing our 12th graders to our kindergartners. So the class of 2020 are this year's 12th graders, class of 2032 are this year's kindergarten students. So the chart on the left is the racial breakdown of students in those classes. And you can see that our incoming kindergarten has more Hispanic and Latino students. It also has more multiracial students. And then the Black population is lower as well as the white population. So a different demographic makeup for our kindergartners than our seniors, and kind of mirrors what we were seeing of how our demographics were changing in that trend slide earlier. There's some differences in free and reduced price lunch, 41% compared to 52%. We know that oftentimes the forms don't get turned in and students don't identify and do the free and reduced lunch paperwork in high school, and that's kind of a natural dip that happens a lot. So this is probably closer than it seems here, but this is who has turned in the paperwork and qualifies for those services. ELL, the big difference is students have exited from ELL, which is great. So 10% of our seniors are still identified as ELL and receiving services for that. 39% of our incoming now kindergarten students are ELL students. Special education looks the same, 8% in each of those. And then there's the top 5 languages excluding English. And I think this is kind of interesting because it's the same languages, they're just in a different order. So the groups do look different. There's the same languages mixed in, but for seniors, the third most is Vietnamese, and then it's 4th for the kindergartners, and then Somali is 5th. And I think that's all. Any questions?
All right. Director Daniels?
I don't have any, thank you.
I don't either.
No.
Director Hardy? No?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay. So at this point, we are going to go on to our Board of Directors discussion and approval. I'm just going to do a quick check. Director Hardy, do we have any cards relating to any of our discussion and approval tonight?
None for these specific agenda items.
Thank you. All right, so we will start with 5.01, Superintendent Performance Evaluation Goals. I would like to ask a board member to make a motion to approve.
I move that we approve the superintendent evaluation goals.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. At this point, a motion has been made to approve the superintendent performance goals, evaluation goals. Are there any discussions?
Just commentary. I know this is what we've been working on. We put a lot of work into it last year, so I'll commend the board for the work it did this year to really look at what the goals meant to do versus what we thought about last year, and then make them more streamlined to what we want. So that was it, just a comment.
Okay. Anyone else? I know I have a comment, but I don't want to.
Yeah, I do too. The 4 goals, I'm satisfied with. I am not satisfied with the key performance indicators. I think those need to be reworked, and if that's included in this evaluation, I'm not going to vote for it.
Thank you.
Well, to that end, do we think that, we're approving the goals from my standpoint. We're approving the goals, not necessarily the method for the evaluation of the goals, which can also be amended later. Not necessarily by me or all of us on this board, but at some point in the future.
So were there all of the KPIs? Because I remember we worked on this, and so I don't exactly remember which KPIs you disagreed with.
So if I could make a comment really quick. So for
Sure.
while Karen's looking at that, for me, I absolutely think the goals, I like the fact that we have 4 and that they're aligned. What I'm struggling with is last year, in some ways, I think we really used the key performance indicators as goals. So we evaluated each one of those. And so and one of the things that I was struggling with in rereading these again is the fact that the KPIs still don't have clear measurable things. So if I'm looking at this as an evaluator, I don't know when we say things like percentage of seniors completing entrance requirements to a post-secondary experience prior to graduation, what are we looking for? There's no clarity to me as far as what is that percentage of increase that we're looking for. And so I'm also struggling with the fact of knowing exactly what we are approving in tonight's motion, whether we're approving just the first column, which is goals, and then we're going back to put some more measurements in there. I'm also concerned with the fact still that if we're treating KPIs as goals, that there are still, I believe, 22 of those, which still does not seem, I know it's cut down, but it's still quite a few to be evaluated on.
On the agenda item itself does say that we are approving the goals and the key performance indicators with this agenda item in motion. So potentially indicating that both would be approved unless amended. So I think that's, if we're not satisfied with both together, then I think that's what's on the table now.
So I guess my question would be, over the time we've worked on this, has that feedback been given? Because we've presented this 2 or 3 times, and I know Maya has asked the board to chime in and sent out this information to say whether or not there were changes. And I don't know, have people responded to her to make those changes? Because it doesn't look like this is different than what we decided on in our last work session. However, I don't know if there was feedback given to change it.
Yes, I can speak for myself. I know that at the last board meeting, I had asked some of those questions, and it was my understanding we were going to receive a document to be able to work on, to go over and say what the key performance indicators as far as for actually evaluating those, and then that we were going to get back together again to go over that. And I do not believe either one of those things have happened. So I think that's my biggest concern, again, is on the key performance indicators and how exactly they're going to be evaluated. So I would have no problem approving the goals, but I would like to see us really put some more, we've had the one work session this year on the goals. I'd like to see us do something more on the KPIs before approving those.
I agree.
Okay. Is there any other discussion or comments?
I have voiced objections, and I don't think that they were paid attention to. So I think things just kind of got left the way they were.
No.
So if not approved tonight, when would you envision that we want to get this completed by next?
Right.
I was suggesting a work session next Wednesday. I don't know how available we are.
Well, so exactly, to actually approve these, we'd have to wait till the first meeting in November.
Right.
Would you want it to be done by then, whatever extra work we need to do?
I think so.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'd like to see it before our next board meeting. Okay. Okay. So at this point, we have a motion on the table to approve. Sorry, I've got to pull back up my other. I think it's one moment. To approve 5.01, the superintendent's performance evaluation goals. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. All those opposed, please say no and raise your right hand. No. Any anyone who wants to abstain? Okay. All right. So motion fails, and we will look to scheduling a work session to go over the superintendent's evaluation plan. So Dr. Watts, if you could help us out with that, we'd appreciate it.
I'll be glad to, and also would recommend including Tricia Lubach from WASDA, who supports leadership development, who also has some key experience with superintendent board evaluation instruments.
Thank you. All right, so at this point, we'll move on to 5.02, resolution number 1567, out of endorsement waivers. I am looking for a motion.
I move that we approve the out of endorsement waivers for the employees referenced.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table to approve resolution number 1567, out of endorsement waivers. Is there any discussion or questions?
Yeah, I have some. These are all individuals that have different things that they're working on, but do they each have, I know some of them have dates that they have to be finished, or do we have dates, how much progress they're supposed to have made on the program? I know we've looked at this in the past for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make sure that I clearly state none of the individuals on this list are conditional certificates. These are all traditionally certificated teachers, and they are teaching outside of an endorsement area. So 18 are out of endorsements this year. Last year, by the way, we had 32. So this is half that number that we had last year. And we have around 9 who were out of endorsement last year. So they are repeats, which means that they are continuing their plan. So every individual on this list does have a plan. They may not necessarily, due to the work that's involved, be able to complete it in 1 year, but there are timelines associated with that plan.
There are 2 of them that say they will be reassigned. What does that mean? They'll be reassigned
in their endorsement area
next year?
Yes.
So they're wherever they are now, they're, okay.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
And then answer some questions too.
Any other questions? All right. So at this time, I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Please say no and raise your right hand. Thank you. Motion passes. Next, we have 5.03, resolution number 1568, replacement educational programs and operations levy. I am looking for a board member to make a motion.
I move to approve resolution number 1568, the replacement educational program and operations levy.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. We have a motion on the table to approve resolution number 1568, replacement educational programs and operations levy. Is there any discussions and questions?
Just a clarifying question is since the last couple times we've done this, we've had to change, the state has changed how much and how we calculate the amount we're going out. And so I could just clarify how we got to these amounts, either the rate per $1,000 or the total levy amount, whichever one it is, how that fits in with the new guidelines.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Director Hardy. So we started discussions in May with leadership team, and since then we've had discussions across all communities, and we focused primarily on keeping a stable tax rate for our KSD community while maintaining educational programming and considering the current per pupil cap and what that would look like. So even at these 215 rates, if we were to collect, barring no changes to enrollment, we projected flat enrollment and a continued growth rate that has been the same historical growth rate in assessed property values for the last 5 years, we would meet the cap. We would exceed the cap in the second year of this levy, and the board would have to do a rollback, which we've done before. So even considering all those things, we had discussions about that.
Right, and like before, we can approve this above the amount and the rollback would just happen automatically without penalty.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. At this time, I will call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion on the table, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Please say no and raise your right hand. Thank you. Motion passes. We are now on to 6.01, consent agenda. Would any board member like to pull an agenda item for discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Director DeBruler.
7.05, 7.09.
They were in the sixth.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Okay, 6.05, 6.09.
Yeah, 605. Make sure I'm on the right one. 09. 7, all hands, community interpreting. What have I done here? Okay, I guess I just jumped one. I'm making sure I'm on the right ones here.
Okay.
Sorry, I apologize. So 605 is the GEM, 609, sound services, 611 all hands, and 620 gift acceptance.
And 620. So I have 605, 609, 611, and 620. Is that correct?
Yes. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. Any others? Okay. So at this time, I am looking for a motion to approve the consent agenda less 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20.
Move that we approve the consent agenda less 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
I'll second.
Oh, thank you. All right. The motion has been made to approve the consent agenda less 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please raise your right hand and say no. Motion passes. So at this time, Director DeBruler, your questions on 6.05?
Yeah, that's for the GEM mentoring service with, his first name, Clover?
Thank you.
Ken Clover. Kendrick. I noticed on the insurance part, it talks about transporting students. Are they going to be transporting students in private vehicles? Do we know?
No, I mean, that's not part of the plan there, so.
It's just part of what we say.
This is Men on the Move, and then the addition of a women's version of that as well. And so that work will be done at the schools.
And I just want to say I'm really happy that a success program for our young women of color is going to be started. I just been interested in that for the last several years.
Mm-hmm.
Do we know when and how they'll be informed of it? How the
Right.
women will be informed?
Yeah, we need to get this contract in place. First, we were working with that. We've changed a little bit of the focus around. It's going to be really much more high school focused than middle school with both groups, and then maybe some work with the high school students, then going into the middle school at the end of the year for transition activities. So we have a basic plan ready to go now that we've got the contract. If we get the contract into place tonight, then we will work with GEM to solidify the plans and selection process and go from there.
And there'll be a selection process rather than just anybody who wants in comes in, or?
The way it has kind of worked last year, and it's both selection, but also if kids want to self-select, they can apply to the program as well and join in. So that's why when we moved it more to the school-based operation, it allowed more kids to be able to do that. Yeah.
And make sure that KPA is definitely involved.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
Okay, great. 6.09?
That's the sound services contract. It's $96,000 over 2 years. I'm just wondering why only $27,500 for this year?
This is part of a 2-year Kaiser grant that you had approved for us to apply for around that work. And so it is actually split over 2 years. And so that's part of the plan is this year that we'll be doing part of the work, and then next year there'll be more to.
Portion of next year?
Yeah,
Is that right?
so because we're getting started later this year then, yeah.
I'm pleased to see that it's focusing on Tier 2 and 3 practices, because that shows that there are schools who have become proficient at first and even second tiers and are moving on to the third tier, and I think that's really great.
Absolutely.
Is there one school that's asked for help with student-led mental health campaign?
No, there's actually several schools that are a part of this, and so it is. Right now, we just recently got the grant. We wanted to make sure that we contracted, and then we're going to work out the details with each of the schools that are selected, and then.
That's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
And it says you're developing a resource map. What does that mean exactly?
Part of that is just really what it speaks to is try to map out all the different resources that are available out there, and so that people can choose from a menu, kind of, basically, and so each school doesn't have to develop everything themselves, type of a thing, and so it's all pretty much set out is our goal, our plan, our hope.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, 6.11.
Yeah, last year for the all hands, it was $25,000, and this year it's up to $150,000. Why is that?
Members of the board, Dr. Watts, Ms. Howley, I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to our relatively new Assistant Director of Risk Management, Matt Tardif, who is here to answer your questions about that.
The budget increase is related to a staff member in the district who requires speech interpretation or language interpretation for being hearing impaired. So the amount of hours worked has increased for that staff member, and additional staff members have come on board that require that. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. All right, 6.20.
All right, that's the gift acceptance. There's one on there that says there's a gift to Men on the Move for food expenses for 2018 and 19 for their meetings for $5,000. Is that a repayment to the district, or is that a typo on the school year?
I believe this was the King County Housing Authority had agreed to pay for those, and so we were still working out and didn't get that through, and so the gift acceptance hasn't been yet, but they had always agreed to pay for the transportation and the food for those things last year, and the check just came in, so now, yeah, we're reconciling.
All right.
Okay.
All right, so any further questions on those? Okay, so Director DeBuehler, it's up to you if you do want. We're looking for a motion to approve if you want to do them individually or as a group.
Group is fine.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion to approve 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20.
Move to approve consent agenda item 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion on the table to approve 6.05, 6.09, 6.11, and 6.20 from the consent agenda. I will call for the vote. All those in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed may say no and raise your right hand. Motion passes. Thank you. And we will now move on to our informational Gates planning update. Dr. Watts.
I apologize. Yes, it is just informational. And do we have any additional questions for our Gates Planning Grant update from the board?
Just a comment that I appreciate the advice that was, or the commentary that was taken and looked at what this actually grant could do and worked with the Gates Foundation to figure out what it could do. Now looking at a detailed plan for a cloud-based data ecosystem and going into the direction that figuring out what they could do to kind of meet the needs and address some of the concerns that we had. So I appreciate this update.
Absolutely. I know there were questions about cloud-based storage, and certainly we are going to continue to use this technology to support the needs of our district and become a more data-informed organization. Thank you for those comments. Any other questions?
All right, thank you. So at this point, we will move on to our communication from the audience, and I've asked Director Hardy if he could please help call on audience members. Just a reminder, you will have 3 minutes to address the board, and please use the microphone to the right of the board, and you will hear a timer when your time is up. So Director Hardy?
I want to go first with Angela Herrera. This one over
Angela.
here. Yeah, that's right. So go ahead.
No worries.
Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to look back on the recognition proclamations for the America's Safe School Week. Coincidentally, just today, because we're students of back row, including me, are students of Kentwood High School, and we just had a little presentation of a little drill to going over intruders that go into school that will have the intention of harming students. What would you say what more are you guys, the Kent School District, going to do to enforce school safety later on in the future of Kent School District students, if that makes sense?
So just a reminder that the board listens to comments, but does not generally respond at this. So if you have questions, we can certainly follow up.
All right. I guess that's it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, a reminder, if you could please state your name when you come to the podium, please. Thanks.
You're good.
Angela Ferreira.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alexander Voparath. Sorry for the last name.
Hello, my name's Alexander Voparath. Hi there, guys. So it's probably a quick question. So as of lately, as you know, as my fellow friends are all seniors, so we just wondering how you guys are dealing with the AP system, because in our AP system we lost around 10 to 13 courses, and a lot of us, it's pretty important in our time in our senior year to take important classes that we need for our college. I'm just wondering why you chose this decision to restaff our members, because we lost a lot of staff too also. So I'm just wondering what you guys think about that and why you chose that decisions.
All right. Thank you. And again, this is a chance for the board to listen, so we won't be responding at this time. But if you have left contact information on the card, we can have someone get back to you.
Oh, okay.
Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Then we have Michael Tran.
All right. Hi, I'm Michael Tran, and as Angelo recently said, that we had a presentation on the whole school safety and lockdown, and I just want to say that at first I thought it was pretty ridiculous at first, but then I soon realized how important this really is and how we really need to keep the school and the students and everyone safe. And I also want to say that sometimes when I walk around the school, I feel pretty safe around it, but sometimes when I walk around in certain areas, I don't feel so safe at all. And I just hope that you guys could improve just safety and just everywhere.
Normally we don't do this, but can you elaborate on some of the places that you don't feel safe?
Just just around certain people.
So
it's
people oriented rather than
it's
location
more people
in the school.
oriented.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. That is all of the cards that I have for the audience.
Thank you, Director Hardy. And thank you to our students who took the time to come and speak to us tonight. We appreciate you being here. At this time, we'll move on to our legislative update. Director Hardy, please.
Sure. Well, one reminder is that there's no legislative in session right now, but we, meaning the Washington State School Director Association, is preparing for their legislative assembly. Held that at the very last weekend in September. And it's basically a chance to review the old positions, amend them, add new positions, and put something together, which is what WASTA school directors will take to the legislature when it opens next year. So we've done that. We've done voting. They haven't released the overall priorities yet. That's expected to happen next month at the annual meeting. But if you're curious of what they're talking about, a lot of the topics were changes in K-12 funding, the new school employee benefit system, and what does the next generation of high school graduation requirements look like. There's actually, if you're interested, other school directors, there's a nice video out there from the Legislative Assembly where they had these talks, legislative insights, things like that. In general, all legislative positions will kind of get into either student-focused, staff-focused, capital facilities, funding, or governance, and so we kind of fit in one of those 5 categories. And so as they look for that, probably about 3 or 4 weeks, that WASTA will kind of send that back out. And then from there, that's what we take, or your new legislative representative would take specifically to the legislatures to support those positions. That concludes my update.
Thank you. All right. So at this point, we will move on to board reports and discussions. Director Daniels, would you like to start?
Sure. So October is a very busy month. I was excited to attend. Now there have been so many fundraisers. It seems to be a month of fundraisers and breakfasts and galas and all kinds of things. So I know, was it the food bank breakfast on the 12th? Because there was also, okay, so there's, as well as a grad night auction that was fantastic. So it's always really nice to see the students involved and do things to support our community. So I was happy to do that. Also, lots of homecoming has happened, so I ran into several kids at several high schools, and it's been really exciting to see them. I'm excited about that. That's been fun. I was not able to get into the schools over this last month. It's been a little bit of a challenge with my new schedule, and so I'm feeling a little bit disappointed about that, but I plan to be on track very soon with that again. Other than that, that's really kind of all that I have going on, but I appreciate seeing you all. I really appreciate the students. I would encourage you that if you like to stay after a little bit, have some conversation. We do like to talk to folks after the meeting, so if you'd like to do that. But thank you so much for coming. I appreciate all that you do and all of you for being here, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Director DeRuler?
Yes, I went to talking about fundraisers, the food bank breakfast, and it just always warms my heart to see how many of our people were there, and the police department, the fire department, the community leaders contributing to the food bank. I don't know how much they collected, but I think there were a lot of people there, and I hope they were really generous. And then the next day, I was at the Kent School Foundation Gala, and that was just beautifully done. There were a lot of really generous people there, so I expect that the foundation will have collected more money than they did last year. One of the things that I thought was really special and that I did contribute to was they had bags for each one of the elementary school counselors. There were games, a bag of games, and you just could sign up with X number of dollars, sign up to support this bag of games to go to the school counselors, the elementary school counselors. And I know that, having been in counselors' offices, I know that games are really important for them to talk and to communicate with the kids. So I was really pleased that that was an item on the I guess it was silent auction. I guess it would be called. It was not really an auction. It was just, you just put money into it. So anyway, I'm eager to hear how both of them did on their fundraising. So, and I just got back from sunny California last night. It was 89 degrees there yesterday. So I was glad to see sunshine today anyway. So that's it for me.
Great. Thank you. Director Hardy?
Sure. Well, over the last couple times with food bank breakfast as well, which is always good, I got to spend some good time with members of the Fiscal Recovery Task Force, talking with them, sharing insights from what we're looking at, what they're looking at, sharing information back and forth, making sure that they have a way to go forward. And so I'm really looking forward to more interactions with them as we go through. And then from the other standpoint, I know we didn't get to talk about it earlier, but I've been on the weekly updates with our Clark Newber engagement, and so it's going well. They've been here doing interviews with staff, looking at doing walkthroughs, identifying contracts for the testing selection. So they're getting through that process of pulling all the data together. The kind of the hard work that happens behind the scenes takes up a lot of Ben's team's time, even though they're also preparing for year end. And so that work is ongoing, and it's still pushing forward to what we're looking at. And then finally, you mentioned you were in California, which was nice. I was in Boston, which a little bit better weather than here, but it was still pretty cold. But I was there for a conference, but one of the things we did was we went out and did a volunteer event, and we went to this elementary school in a, kind of a transitional bilingual South Boston neighborhood, Dorchester. And we were talking about, some of the people that we were volunteering with were adults that went there as kids. And we were doing stuff around the school, right? We were building benches, we were painting, we were doing other things. And what kind of made me notice was, that building itself, I think was built in 1909. And really hadn't had a major capital project update in at least 20 to 25 years. So it reminded me of how much that we have here and how much we're investing back in our school district. When you think about what it takes and what your tax dollars are paying for, the capital projects that we're doing, that we're putting forward, that is either building new schools or putting brand new multi-purpose rooms, or just replacing HVACs or whatever it is that's going in. And then some of the other areas are still struggling with that, but we're kind of on the forefront of making sure that our capital planning dollars are going right where they need to go in the schools. So that concludes my report.
Yeah, Debbie, there's one thing. Can I add
Sure.
really quick? I forgot.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was actually in New Orleans last week, but I was at the National Summit for Courageous Conversations, and I will say that there were several districts there. We were well represented from Western Washington, but there was only one person from Kent, and I believe she went on by herself. And so I would really like to, that's some of the work, of course, that I've mentioned before, but I'd really like to see Kent participating in some of the regional equity work that's happening. But it was a fantastic conference, as always. Like I said, probably, I would say, close to 100 folks here from different districts in Western Washington. So something I would really like to see Kent participate in, or something similar, as we are trying to work to make things better for each and all of our kids.
Great, thank you.
Vice President Strauss, just before your final words, I do want to make sure that our students who did have an opportunity to speak just know that we do have staff identified to speak with you before you leave to get some details to the information that you shared with us tonight. So please stay tuned and don't leave before one of our adults speaks with you, okay? Thank you.
All right, so since everyone's saying where they've been, I am back in sunny Texas, where it's supposed to plummet to 50 degrees by Friday. So it'll be interesting to see how folks here react to that. But I did appreciate our work session that we had earlier today on professional development and the strides that we're taking as a district to make sure that it's not only our students that we are educating, but also making sure that our adults, we are also addressing the learning needs of those as well. And I just really want to say, as I'm looking at nearing the end of my 12 years of service on the board, how every time I come to one of these meetings, I am so grateful for all the people in our district, our staff, our students, and our families that really work together to make our district a place that we can be proud of, where our students really are, where we're working hard to prepare them for their futures. And I know that we will continue to do that as we go forward. So I just really want to give a heartfelt thanks to all of those who are here tonight and all of those who continue to serve our district. And I also really appreciate the being the I in kind, especially as we continue on through our year, as we're all working together to make sure that we are really taking that into heart, because it really does make our world a better place. So on that note, I am going to go ahead and adjourn our meeting tonight. Thank you for your attendance, and please drive carefully home. Thank you.